So huge round of applause for him. Thank you. Now we would like to have David Dickson up here for an awesome speech here. David has lots of solutions for us. So a huge round of applause for David Dickson.
Afternoon, everyone, again. For those who don't know me, I'm a retired police officer from the UK. It's only the people here that brought me to here to start talking. This is now the third time I've spoken. Primarily, I want to talk to my former colleagues around the world, not just here in Alberta, and ask them again to remember that they swore an oath to protect the people. I swore an oath to protect the people. I may be retired, but I still hold by that oath. We also swore an oath to serve, but it wasn't to serve politicians. It was to serve the people to whom we were protecting. And every one of them needs to remember that. One of the things, you'll listen to a lot of people talking today, but there's a lot more information out there that you haven't heard. I'd encourage everybody to go back and look at the previous speeches here and be educated. It's important that everybody understands what's going on. The information that I've put together as a retired police officer is based on facts. Everything I've put together and I've published throughout the world has been cross-referenced by thousands of people. From GCHQ, you can look that up, to CSIS, to the RCMP, to the police throughout the world, to the armed forces, to medical professionals, to scientists. I make sure that everything I put out there is a fact. It's part of my training as a police officer. And every single police officer out there should be doing the same thing. Whether you're serving, whether you're retired, whether you are wondering what's going on or not, stop just listening to the bulletins that are put out by your superiors. And remember that they're not your superiors, they are your supervisors. Every single one of you, from a constable who's just come out of training, a sheriff who's just been given his uniform, you have a duty, you have training, you have the knowledge and you have the skills to find out what is really going on. And I encourage, in fact I plead with every single one of you to do your job, to find out what's going on. I speak to a lot of you, from doctors to nurses, to paramedics, to sheriffs, to police officers, to people in the armed forces every single day of the week. I know you want to speak up and you're just waiting for the right time. Well, I'm here to tell you again this week, the right time was March, when people started dying because of the protocols that were put in place.
Yep.
Protocols that were put in place without any authority. You have a duty to follow the law. You have a duty to the people out there and to protect them. We locked this province down with a number of cases that were so ridiculously small, it should have been laughable. 0.04 cases, and we locked this province down. Our average flu season goes up to 250 cases per 100,000, and we locked the province down with 0.04. Now on Facebook, we've asked a couple of times now for our Premier, the brave man that he is, to come down here and talk, to actually answer some questions. And yet again, just like the media, we see he's absent, off somewhere, playing games, maybe having drinks, certainly not wearing a mask, probably socialising, as I know he does. He doesn't follow any of the rules that he thinks that you all should follow. And I know that from speaking to people inside his government. But he wants everybody to shut up. He wants everybody to do as they're told. And he wants everybody to follow what Dina Hinshaw says. Well, guess what? Dina Hinshaw isn't actually making those speeches. Somebody else is making those speeches for her. If you actually look around the world, you'll see that the same message is coming from every single government at the same time, every single week. We all know that no government can actually organize themselves inside a single department. They couldn't organize the proverbial drink, I will be polite, in a brewery. And yet suddenly, no matter what the political party is, no matter what they're doing, they're all doing the exact same thing. And the police and doctors and nurses and paramedics, you're all following one set of information as if it was the only information out there. When did we stop questioning the information we got? When did we stop asking questions? When did we just start following orders? We've heard that before. It wasn't acceptable in the Nuremberg trials. It is not acceptable now. You have the skills, you have the training, and you have the duty to do more. I want to just say one thing from my past as a police officer. As a young officer, the beat that I used to walk covered two facilities. One was a care home, and one was a hospice run by nuns. Every single day I went on duty, I made it my mission to go to both of those locations, to go inside them and show my face, to see those faces light up every single day that I went in there. I couldn't help them, the staff in there helped them. But just knowing that somebody cared and took the time to come in. So I'm going to ask EPS, Calgary Police Service, the RCMP, when was the last time since March you walked into a care home and looked and saw what was going on? When was the last time you actually went in to a school where and saw the children that are in masks? We'll notice that all the police officers that have been in schools for the last God knows how many years have suddenly been swapped out for a whole new new set of people who are just following orders. Last week there was supposed to be a young guy from a school coming down to give a speech. Sadly, he couldn't make it. But the story he wanted to tell was how, as a 17-year-old, typically he'd be allowed to go off the school premises during his break. Right now, him and all his students' friends are not allowed off the premises. They're basically under house arrest from the minute they get there. The community officer from the RCMP that polices that school parks her vehicle across the car park and stops everybody coming out. So they tried to leave last time, and that RCMP officer, instead of actually checking on their safety, making sure that they were looked after, decided that she'd inspect the vehicle and see if she could find a ticket to give them. That's what community policing has come to now, and it's disgraceful. This is not what you joined the force for. And if you did join it to hand out tickets and be a power-hungry person, then for God's sake, please take the uniform off and go home. That's not what it means.
Thank you.
So right now, doctors are being prevented from going into care homes. We see horrors every single day that are in there. Even today, if you've got somebody in a care home and you've got some grandchildren, you will not be allowed, as free as everybody seems to think they are, you will not be allowed to go into that care home unless you're one of the government-approved 2 people that can see them. Is this how we treat our seniors? Is this how we treat our disabled people? Is this what the police join the police for? To actually allow this to happen, and not just allow it to happen, but to support it. People are dying in these care homes. Which brings me to one last point before I open the floor for some questions. If you're following the statistics that the government puts out, you'll have seen a week ago we had 7 people in ICU with COVID-19. When we originally started this in March, the steps that were taken to actually figure out if somebody had COVID-19 or not was a fair amount of diagnosis, tests, x-rays, CT scans. Now, the diagnosis for COVID-19 is as much as, have you got a cough? Have you got a runny nose? Then you must have COVID. Stay home. We're entering flu season. We're entering cold season. And you will not be diagnosed with anything else unless you force your healthcare professionals to diagnose you. Anybody right now, if you phone 311 and say, I've got every single symptom from COVID, you will be told that you have COVID. You may have bacterial pneumonia. You might have strep throat. You may have something that could be treated with 3 days of antibiotics and you're good to go. But instead of that, you will be forced to stay home and isolate. If you're in a care home, you will be locked in your room and denied any company from anyone for a minimum of 2 weeks. Not only that, the whole centre will be locked down. Is this medical care? Is this how we live as a society? Right now, the ICU number has suddenly doubled from 7 to 15. But just remember the steps that go into diagnose that. We've heard about the inaccuracies of the PCR tests. If you think the serology tests are any better, then again, ask some experts here in Edmonton. Maybe ask some of the doctors at the Royal Alex. They'll tell you. They'll never speak out aloud in public, which is a disgrace. I don't know what they're waiting for. I don't know what the police are waiting for. If you're waiting for the time was March. It's certainly no longer than now. As we move forward, more and more people are going to get diagnosed, and they're not going to be treated. You're going to be told you've got COVID. Stop assuming you've got COVID. If your doctor, every time you went to him last year with a sniffle, said, oh, you've got brain cancer, would you just walk away because that was the current symptom that everybody was saying? No, you'd ask more questions. Well, guess what?
Second opinion.
I actually, and the actual term is ventilator acquired pneumonia. I know because I've got it. 10 years ago, I was intubated badly. My lungs look like late stage COVID every single day of the week. My O2 sats are low enough that if I went into a hospital right now, they'd put me on a ventilator and kill me. How do I know that? Because my own doctors have told me.
Because they're doing it.
And they're doing it to everyone.
Yes.
Right now, if you actually go into a hospital, and again, all this information's on all the government websites, it's the standard procedure. If you go into a hospital, normally, you would be diagnosed and checked. You would have a throat swab. You would have some chest x-rays. You would be checked to see if you've got something that can be treated. But now, you're told to stay home. When did that ever make sense? When did we stop actually looking after people? Again, the professionals in the hospital, they say, yeah, we know it's wrong, but this is what we're told to do. Well, guess what? We had a very brave gentleman last week come up and speak about what's happening in the Stollery. There are a lot more people out there, and I'm talking to not just the police now, but as police officers, we're part of the first line emergency first responders. So I'm now talking to the people in the hospitals, the people in the care homes. You're all talking every single day to each other about how this is wrong. Well, while you keep talking to each other about it and not talking to somebody else, it's going to continue to be wrong, and people are going to die. I know you're scared. I know every one of you's scared. But you're going to get a lot more scared when it's you that is dragged off and put on a ventilator, when all you've got is maybe bacterial pneumonia or strep throat that you could have had an antibiotic for.
Exactly.
So right now, you need to speak to your colleagues. You need to make a decision as a group. There is strength in numbers. If you feel it is wrong in your heart, if everything about what is happening around you feels wrong, then it is wrong. You've been doing this for years, you've been looking after people for years. My mother-in-law's been in the same care home for 10 years, and it is the best place for her and always has been. She loves that place, or she did till 6 months ago. Now, it's not the place that she used to be, and the staff in there are struggling. So, whether you want to do it by anonymously, on my website, on my Facebook site, my wife has sent out some messages. We can be contacted. If you want to give your story anonymously, fine, contact us and we'll get that story out. But the reality is, if you don't start standing up as a group, imagine if one care home, if the staff in one care home said enough and came outside, along with the residents who've been asking to come outside and protest what's happening to them and let the people know what it's like to be imprisoned, not looked after. If those people came outside, you would find very, very fast that this government would climb down. They're doing everything they're doing today by consent. From mask wearing in Edmonton, where, as my wife said, check the bylaw. There isn't a single person in Alberta that doesn't meet the requirements of that exemption. So anybody who's wearing a mask, particularly if you're wandering around in the outside wearing a mask, you're doing it by consent. And it's time you woke up. It's time you asked why. People sometimes say, oh, well, we wear seatbelts. And as a police officer, I know very well why you wear a seatbelt. But the funny thing is, we don't have a whole list of exemptions on seatbelts. You wear a seatbelt, whether you're pregnant, whether you've got medical conditions or anything. You wear a seatbelt. You are required to by law because it's safe. But suddenly for masks, which are supposed to protect us from the most dangerous virus the world has ever seen, it must be because it was justified as shutting down society completely and allowing thousands of people to die without getting cancer treatment or anything else. So if it is so dangerous, why have we got a list of exemptions that's almost as long as the rules itself? Why have we got every possible reason to not wear a mask? Because it's not really that dangerous. If it was, you wouldn't have an exemption. You would be told, if you can't wear a mask, you can't come out. But that's not the case. So have a bit of common sense. And actually think, why are all those exemptions there? Why are we allowed, why are you allowed to sit down in a restaurant or sit down in a school and take your mask off? Does the virus run away when you sit down? Maybe we should all start crawling around on the floor. Is it the height? Is it the chairs? Is it the food it's frightened of? None of it makes sense. And if you're not asking questions right now, then, I don't know, talk to everybody you know. And again, one last time, to all the professionals out there in uniform, do your job, do your research, ask questions, stop just following orders because you've got nothing better to do. You have a duty beyond the next bulletin. They are your supervisors, not your superiors. You are smarter than this. You have access to information. The people over there in Alberta Justice, the sheriffs, you all know it's wrong. Now start asking questions and push back. At the end of the day, there's not that many people that are telling you what to do. If you start asking questions, then they'll start backing down. So, any questions?
I'm a medically retired nurse, and I woke up when we had to give flu shots to our patients, and we were all brainwashed, all of us, to say that vaccines save everybody, right? Of course, that's not true. My patients, after the flu shot, some of them got really, really sick, and then we had some die with pneumonia. That's when I woke up to the vaccines, and then when I start saying, as a nurse, I am medically retired, how bad it was. I was attacked like you would not believe. Like I was the enemy. Meanwhile, I was trying to help people, especially moms, not to vaccinate your children because they give the same amount to a grown man that they do to a child. And they have fluoride, they have formaldehyde, they have mercury, they have aborted fetuses. They have so many kids are allergic to peanut butter. Why? When I grew up, we had peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Why? Because they grew it right on the peanut. That's why all our kids are now allergic to peanut butter, and some of them have anaphylactic shock. It's wrong, and everything you said is true. But the only thing that you didn't mention was the tracing. The tracing is pure evil. It's so that everyone that has their Bluetooth on will be able to get traced. It will be downloaded in your phone. So they'll say, even if you don't get a swab, you will see as you're positive, even though you're not. You haven't even gone for the test. It's all eugenics. It's Agenda 21. It's to kill our freaking people. That's what this is about. Our old people. That's what this is about. And we need to realize that this cannot go on. This cannot go on. We have to come together as humanity and love each other and do the right thing, which is help our people, the ones that are able to. I have bad knees. I don't care. Even if I had a collar, I would still come out and support what's right. As a nurse, as a former nurse, I don't care. I don't care how many people would attack me, and they will. I don't care. But we need to stop the tracing, we need to stop the lockdown, and we need to stop the ID 2020, which are going to be in the vaccines. It's the worst vaccine ever. No trials. We're going to be all being treated as lab rats. Literally. This is the worst vaccine ever. Please don't take it. Tell everyone not to take it. My own family thinks I'm crazy. I don't care. Because this vaccine will undoubtedly, first of all, flus and colds, there's no cure. Never was. That's why we always say common cold. There's no cure. We do the symptoms. We provide treatments for the symptoms. There's no cure. That's why there's no cure for flus or colds. We treat the symptoms. Now they're going to make you take a vaccine that lasts 3 months, and then you have to take another vaccine because it's going to mutate. It's like this all the time.
Okay, so we've got a retired nurse who's brought up a couple of points. I'm not going to get into details of whether you should and shouldn't take a vaccine. That's a choice, which does bring us to one important point. Anybody who's got somebody in a care home right now, in June of this year, Dina Hinshaw ordered all the care homes to actually do asymptomatic testing on all the residents and staff. As part of that process, she has to obtain informed consent. Well, first of all, the consent that was requested was not informed. More importantly, on that informed consent, they also asked people back in June to, as soon as they were on the phone, could you just give us consent for the flu vaccine for your loved ones? At that time, nobody had mentioned to anybody that the flu vaccine they're about to give to residents in care homes is a double dose, extra strong version of the flu vaccine. Now remember back to what I've just told you, any signs of COVID, which could be a reaction to the flu vaccine, there's suddenly a COVID diagnosis. Now they'll try and tell you that they've covered that off because as long as you have the reaction within the first 24 hours, they'll just assume it's from the vaccine. But guess what? People get reactions from vaccines for days and weeks after. So suddenly we're going to have a lot more people who are going to be COVID positive just because they had a vaccine. So I'm not going to tell you, I'm not going to discuss what's in the vaccines and what the vaccines are to come. But everybody needs to be informed. You need to go and do your research. If you've given any consent up to now that wasn't informed, go and revisit that. Go check before. Don't assume that the consent you've given was the right thing to do at the time. A lot of time has passed since then. And just one last thing in following up, just on the contact tracing, yeah, that's my area of expertise. Come and look me up on LinkedIn and I'll tell you all about contact tracing and how it works. I've been lecturing on this for almost a decade internationally on that particular area. But that's a much bigger discussion. But I will say, do not install the app on your phone.
No, do not.
Anyway, the bells are ringing. people want to go have a walk, everybody can go off and Kyle's going to move you all off now. Anybody who wants to stick around and ask some questions, me and my wife and a few other people will be sticking around. We'll answer any questions you've got. And again, thanks for coming out, everybody. Awesome.